fired for effect.
These things, oh, they're hot. They're hot.
All right. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your lunch with us. My name is Ignatius Liberto. I'm the Chief of Staff for Joint Force Headquarters Doden, and I'd like to provide some opening comments before I introduce the panel, and then we certainly welcome your questions. It's a pleasure to be here today on behalf of Joint Force Headquarters Doden. We have in attendance our Commander, Vice Admiral Nancy Norton, as well as our Deputy Commander, Rear Admiral Crichton, here in the audience. So if I get out of line, I've got one on my starboard side and one on my port side to keep me squared away. We are a very young organization. We stood up as a component command of the United States Cyber Command back in 2015, and only this past January did we achieve FOC, full operational capability. We fulfill United States Cyber Command's missionary to secure, operate, and defend the Doden, the Department of Defense's complex technical infrastructure used by all DoD organizations to carry out missions across the combatant commands, the services, the intel functions, and business operations for DoD. This essentially means we're DoD's defensive cyberspace operations arm. Our mission statement is as follows. Joint Force Headquarters, Department of Defense Information Network exercises command and control of Doden operations and defensive cyberspace operations internal defensive measures, or as we say, Doden Ops and DCO at EM, globally in order to synchronize the protection of DoD component capabilities and to enable power projection and freedom of action across all warfighting domains. Simply put, we help the users of the Doden achieve mission success. Our vision statement is quite simply to be the principal leader of cyberspace defense, assuring DoD missions. Although we are a young organization, Department of Defense Information Network is creating and directing significant change in the cyberspace warfighting domain in the areas of command and control, operational risk to mission, cyber inspections and assessments, common operating picture efforts, and planning and integrating cyber with operations in the other warfighting domains. And we are thinking about information and intelligence sharing requirements as well. These innovative and proactive measures push for superiority in cyberspace and work to shape adversarial behavior through unified and integrated defensive cyberspace operations. To my right is our J2, Colonel Casey Carey. He serves as the Director of Intelligence for Joint Force Headquarters Doden. As a Director, he's charged with cyberspace intelligence analysis, production, planning, collection management, and counterintelligence for our headquarters. To his right is Colonel Paul Kraft, our J3, Director of Operations. He's responsible for the operational level command and control of Doden network operations and defensive cyberspace operations for all DoD networks and their functional synchronization and integration as a key subordinate organization to the United States Cyber Command. Continue on to the right is our J5, Colonel Iven, who serves as Director of Strategy, Engagements, and Plans for our headquarters. The Director is responsible for developing cyberspace operational strategies, campaign plans, and contingency plans. This Directorate supports command strategic engagements with the combatant commands, server cyber components, and the Department of Defense agencies. And on the far right, also dappered out in civilian attire, is retired Air National Guard Colonel Dr. James Matlock, where he is the Director of Joint Force Headquarters Doden's Department of Defense Information Network Readiness and Security Inspections, our DRSI. He serves as the principal advisor to our commander on inspections, assessments, audits pertaining to defensive cyberspace operations and defensive cyberspace operations internal defensive measures conducted on the Doden, which is a global joint area of operations. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the principal staff for Joint Force Headquarters Doden, and at this time, we'll ask if there's any questions. If not, I have one for our J3 to open up the dialogue here. Colonel Kraft, we hear the term Daco. What does it mean and why is it important to Joint Force Headquarters Doden and the cyberspace warfighting domain?
So many folks may not be familiar with the term Daco. It's been used sporadically over the last couple of years, but it's been codified now. A directive authority for cyberspace operations, and for Joint Force Headquarters Doden, that is our authority to help synchronize and integrate, direct, and see to the services, the service networks, the combatant command networks, and all the agency networks, the 22 different agency networks, 42 in total between the combatant command services and agencies, So when we have to direct network operations, periods of non-disruption, authorized service interruptions, and to include security operations from scanning and patching, the number of IAVMs, I'm sure you're familiar with that, the IA vulnerability messages that we send out. So who sends those out? We send those out. How many do we send out? Hundreds and hundreds, about 317, I think, in 2017 went out last year. And orders. The orders for how to defend our network, how to actively defend our network, is done through our authorities called Daco. For us, it's really, quote unquote, the magic sauce of this headquarters that allows us to organize and direct all those services networks, the combat command networks, and those agency networks to include DISA.
All right, thank you.
Daco.
For our J5, the National Military Strategy talked about expanding the competitive space and seizing the initiative to challenge our competitors. How is Joint Force Headquarters Doden incorporating this into our strategy?
So for us, it's all about campaigning. And as you look at the environment right now, we heard in the commander's lunchtime remarks yesterday talk about the number of events and the fact that we are in constant contact. So it's about campaigning at a level of war short of armed conflict. So instead of talking about what you traditionally talk about, deny, disrupt, degrade, defeat, we talk about things like improve and counter and contest, because that's where we're having to operate every day. So that's what we've worked into our 5-year plans to do that across all the combatant commands, services, and agencies, as Colonel Kraft mentioned.
All right, thank you, sir. For the J2, in the cyber domain, we seem very reactive in our ability to respond to threat actions against our networks. Do you have any thoughts on how we may become more predictive to give our commanders better indications and warnings of impending cyber threats?
Well, Chief, I have to agree with you. It's too often we don't get an idea of what the threat intentions are until they're hitting the network boundary. And if I compare the cyber domain to the land domain, I usually don't tell the boss we're under attack until such time as the bullets are metaphorically hitting behind her head. So not the place we want to be. So you're right, absolutely kind of reactive right now. There's a way ahead, though, to get more predictive. And I would challenge our industry partners to help us with this. But the bottom line is, from where we're starting, we're looking at leveraging what the J3 is doing right now with organizing the battle space in the Department of Defense Information Network. And so the J3 has set things up so that the 42 disparate organizations on the Doden all have their own battle space, and they all have their own reporting mechanisms, which he calls red reporting. That red reporting can then be analyzed to pull out trends. If you're an intelligence officer, you take those trends, you pull out the spikes, start analyzing the spikes, and find out why they're spikes. So that's kind of the first step in it. The second step is our effort to go after an automated solution to our predictive intelligence. And it starts with behavioral analytics. So, what we've done is since January, we've been encoding a capability called the Integrated Cyber Intelligence Platform. And we're starting with commercial data, commercial intelligence data. We're going to be fusing that together and proving that it works from a behavioral analytics standpoint to give us some predictability. Once we do that, then we'll look at integrating it onto the DISA big data platform and to have it all with the government data at the same time with that sensor data.
All right, thank you very much, sir. For Dr. Matlock, a DRSI question. Can you provide a high-level description of the Department of Defense's next-generation CCRI, what we're now calling the Kakori, the Command Cyber Operational Readiness Inspection?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chief. To calibrate our thinking, I would submit to you that some of you in the audience are familiar with the Command Cyber Readiness Inspection, which was really about information assurance and vulnerability management, a compliance-based inspection. That criteria has been strengthened. It's no longer the center point on the table for Doden inspections. What we will find now is we're looking at trying to get to a picture of what does operational risk look like for a mission owner, their assigned CSSPs and program managers, how they conduct their mission, defend their mission space, as well as defend the Doden. So What we're looking at now for our criteria for looking at operational risk, we're looking at mission or mission impact statements as we go out and conduct an inspection. We take the operational mission analysis that comes from our J3, the knowledge base that comes from our J2 on the threat intelligence package to give us the threat, and then the vulnerabilities, which we are familiar with. For example, the CCRI inspections was a compliance-based inspection, which is a function of vulnerability, and we've defined operational risk as looking at mission, threat, and vulnerability. So what we'd like to do is go out and help folks as they conduct their normal business, look at their defensive cyber operational effectiveness, and that would be a very high-level overview for you. The details of it, which we can get into shortly. So, Chief.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, well, that concludes the softball questions. We're going to take it up a notch now. For the J3, given protecting DoD data and information is a top priority, how does this relate to a move to cloud-based construct? What defensive factors are critical for protecting networks and information with this shift?
So I guess let me take a step back. So cloud is another part. The cloud is another part of the DoD's information network. Let me just say that up front. Similar to what is traditional infrastructure, routers, switches, servers, is part of infrastructure. And so what was mentioned before is what the 3 is working on is through an operation known as Gladiator Shield, is we are organizing the DoD's information network battle space, laying out what does each organization's network look like, who are the network operators and network security providers, CSSPs, that we have to secure that battle space. What are the task-critical assets, the important assets that we definitely have to defend? What is the mission-relevant cyber terrain that is important to our mission, that if we lose that terrain, let's call it a router, a switch, a data center, or a circuit, that we have to secure? And then lastly, as part of Gladiator Shield, we're asking the services, the combat commands, and the agencies then to do an aggregate risk assessment for their portion of the network to say, I understand my battle space, I understand who is operating and securing that battle space. I know what's important that I need to defend. And lastly, if I have any gaps, that's my risk. That comes back to us as an organization that's OpCon to Cyber Command, and then we provide, I'll call it an Uber aggregated risk assessment of what that network looks like. Now specifically to the DoD's move to the cloud and DOD's information in the cloud is still part of the DoD's information network. That is key, and what all that means. So our responsibility still to see to that, our ability still to make sure that it is actively secured, either through contract or through other means, to make sure that it's actively defended as still part of the network. I don't know if that was clearly understood on the front end of when we went to race to the cloud, but it is key to the success of the Department of Defense is that we consider this piece of infrastructure the same part as key infrastructure as other key infrastructures like our backbone network, the ICS SCADA network, our program of record network, our platform IT network, our cross-domain network, and lastly, our instances that are in the cloud. All that in total is all part of the DoD's network, and it is the responsibility of the DoD to operate, secure, and actively defend that.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right. Because we're in an unclassified format, it's very difficult to get into specifics about how we secure, operate, and defend the DoD. Understanding we have 3 principal warfighting functions: command and control, movement, maneuver, and intel. Colonel Kraft mentioned Operation Gladiator Shield, which was issued out as an order in August of 2017. And this past April, we implemented the DoD cyber tasking cycle. I'm going to start with the J2 and just go down the lane here, how each directorate supports Operation Gladiator Shield and the DoD cyber tasking cycle to ensure that we are globally integrating and synchronizing DoD operations and defensive cyberspace operations, internal defensive measures for all 42 DoD components and their AOs.
Sure. So from an intel perspective, on a daily basis, this order goes out every day. We conduct some threat analysis to determine if there are new threats or if there are updates to threats that we have identified earlier. And we put a collection emphasis portion into the tasking order as well. So if there are particular threats we're supposed to be looking for from our 42 different organizations, we try to highlight them to identify them in the order.
J3, anything to add, sir?
I'll go last. I'll let the 5 go. Thanks.
So one of the things in support of OGS that we're working in the 5 is, Colonel Kraft will tell you that compliance is a dirty word, right? We're moving from looking at it as just strictly compliance, but in terms of assessing how are we changing the operational environment to be proactive, not just to do incident response, but as we secure, operate, and defend, what are we doing proactively, and how are we making those changes in the environment? So that's what we're working on right now is building an assessment framework. We talked about firing out all those orders in the past year, but how effective were we really looking at it operationally in terms of are we going against those priority assets, those TCAs that need to be defended? So that's how we're supporting OGS.
The DRSI Joint Force Headquarters Dome Inspection Program supports Operation Gladiator Shield by helping to empower the area of operation commanders and their staff in terms of defining their mission and mission space or left and right boundaries. Sometimes when we go out and do the inspection, we start with asking the mission owner to tell us about their mission, and then we enter into a mission analysis to make sure we're focused on what's important to them, their mission relevant terrain that's cyber, and their points of presence on the DODN, and that helps to shape the inspection by making that centerpiece on the table, and instead of merely talking with folks who are doing IT or information assurance or vulnerability management, we're talking directly to the commander and the mission owner, and then that mission owner talks with their staff about here's what we need to do in terms of deliverables to defend the DODN. So sort of the first thing we do is scope the missions to make sure we meet the area commander's AO.
All right, so we talked about Gladiator Shield, this operation that's been ongoing now since August of last year. And really it's about, I'll say, defining the network or building the plane. Obviously, folks, the plane is already in flight, but we want to make sure that we understand the wiring of the plane, what the plane looks like today. Do we have any gaps? Do we have the right amount of operators and securers on the plane? That's what Gladiator Shield is, which I'll call that building the plane. The flight plan is what we just talked about, which was the cyber tasking cycle. The cyber tasking cycle is new to the cyber domain. It's been in the air, very much in the air domain. So I want to talk about it now in the cyber domain. The cyber tasking cycle there's 3 parts of the cyber tasking cycle. The first part is known as the Cyber Operations Directive. This is a 6-month look as what is important for the Department of Defense on what we have to do to operate, secure, and defend our networks. Short term for that is known as the SIOD. 6-month look. It is managed through a Council of Colonels, a 1 and 2 star, I'll call it GOSC, and then a 3-star board, the DODN Principals Meeting, which is led by Vice Admiral Norton and is run at the 3-star level. That document is codified every 90 days and updated every 90 days as almost the aiming point of where we need to go as the Department of Defense for secure operating and defending the network at the operational level of war. That's the SIOD as part of the cyber tasking cycle. The second part of the cyber tasking cycle is this Master Cyber Operations Plan, short title MCOP. And it is a 30-day look now of where do we have all of our cyber defensive forces, CSSPs and cyber protection teams maneuvering on our space to secure and actively defend our network based on threat. And the last part for us is this 24-hour cycle that we talked about, where we take a lot of input in from the different joint directorates, where we have is known as the Cyber Tasking Order, or the CTO. For ours is known as the D, or DODN CTO, and it is a daily look of what is going on our network, from what did we get in the last 24 hours from our intelligence community in terms of what's going on in the network across all layers of intelligence. That's part one. We look at, are we hitting the things we need to hit from a J5 perspective on are we going to hit the mark for the SIAD going forward and the formal assessments plan. We look at what's going on with DSRI in terms of inspections that they've had, what have been the latest CCRI scores, the latest CCORI scores, and then we look at it from a deep analysis of what's going on our network. One of the things that we've done just in the last, this is new, what we've done in the last 90 days is we've taken major portions of our network. So let's look at let's talk about DISA. We've taken DISA's $24 billion network, the network that runs the majority of the DoD. We flipped it, and it's now a $24 billion sensor grid, okay? And we're taking all that information off of that sensor grid, and we're looking at it in terms of who is scanning us right now, what vulnerabilities are they looking for, who is being spearphished, who is being whaled against us, what websites are they trying to look at, what websites or information are they trying to pull, and we gather that every single day. Every single day. That's the red reporting that you've heard about. We apply that and we come up with a therefore. Therefore, we need to do the following things. We inform the organizations, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard. We inform the combatant commands. We inform the agencies that, hey, we're in a constant state of conflict, and this is what the adversary wants to look at or get to on your network. We also did this quick scan on your network, and you are or you not patched against this vulnerability. We could then order, based on the layers of defense, how we could defend against those adversaries. And we publish that operations, security, and defense plan every single day. And it's good for 24 hours, and that happens every single day. Really Monday through Friday, the plan runs through the weekend. But that's what we do to actively secure, operate, and defend our networks today. This is a big change for the Department of Defense. That's why this organization was stood up to synchronize and integrate and actively command and control all the DoD's networks.
All right. Thank you, sir. Secretary Mattis has been quoted to say that his number one priority in cyberspace is to defend the Department of Defense network, the DoDN. Our command has been charged with operationalizing this IT infrastructure that Colonel Kraft talked about and turn it into a warfighting domain. For Dr. Matlock and DRSI, would you consider the Kakori methodology to be a DoD-wide approach, or might there be potential for Kakoris to be utilized as a whole-of-government approach?
Well, the strategic leadership from Commander Cyber Command set a stage for a national DoD global model. I think United States President under Executive Order 13800 set criterion for how to move forward in inspections and cybersecurity, and we've adopted the NIST cybersecurity framework, the NIST cybersecurity functions as a prism by which to assess somebody, an entity conducting their mission, how well they're performing defensive cyber operations and how effective they are at that. I think that you'll see the risk management framework in there. So I think there's something in there for folks who are used to doing information assurance and vulnerability management as a key cornerstone of where we started from. We retained 100% of those measures of performances. We've also looked at defensive cyber operations. We've written measures of effectiveness. So now we're measuring cyber effects. So for the folks that are interested in looking at defensive cyber operations and internal defense measures conducted on the DoDN, I would say it's a national model. For folks that are in private industry and may have an interest in looking at operational risk, clearly this is a model for you to give consideration to, because it's nested already into the vision of the President of the United States, U.S. Cyber Command Commander, who's recently been elevated to COCOM status. There's been commitments made by Commander Joint Force Headquarters DoDN and its deliverables, as well as a Cyber Service Component Commander. So I think you have a DoD standard. It's clearly got application globally, as well as with our industrial base.
All right. Thank you, sir. You know, a couple of years ago, I was in uniform, and I can remember working on an operational plan, and when it was all done, the commander looked at us and said, "Oh, and make sure y'all sprinkle a little bit of that cyber stuff on the plan." So for the J5, how is Joint Force Headquarters DoDN integrating planning with the other combatant commands, as well as within the other operational domains?
Thanks, Chief. Right now, we're working really hard with a small group of people to integrate planning across primarily the combatant commands. You know, we talked about figuring out what your defended assets are, what your task critical assets are, but Admiral Norton, as the commander, she has to be able to operate in mutual support. She operates as both a supported and a supporting commander. And so that's why it's important that we integrate it with the other domains and the other combatant commands. Currently, that's almost on a one-to-one basis, but in the future, U.S. Cybercom is looking to put personnel forward into the combatant commands to integrate that planning. And once that starts to happen, we do it kind of on a case-by-case basis, pushing people forward. But as that starts to happen, that will integrate the planning between U.S. Cybercom, JFHQ DODN, and the combatant commands once we're integrated in their planning efforts as well.
All right, thank you. I'd say let's do a follow-on to that question. Colonel Kraft, can you share with us the concept of the cyberspace operations integrated planning element that the surface cyber components are putting at the combatant commands and how that relates to our headquarters?
So the Cyber Operations Integrated Planning Element is an organization that is about planners. It's planners for it at the 9 combatant commands. I'm not sure if we're going to put a Cyber Operations Integrated Planning Element at Cyber Command now that they're an elevated combatant command. Let's assume not. But at least at the 9 combatant commands. And their focus is much of what Colonel Iven said, is there'll be intel planning, there'll be ops planning, there'll be long-term planning, and there'll be training going forward. And because every combatant command is on their own battle rhythm and their own cycle, it's very hard for one organization to make sure they're in 9 battle spaces and 9 time zones, making sure we understand what each planning element is doing with each of their op plans. But by having those people push forward and communicating back to us, we're able to execute what we need to do through our Daco authorities in order to enable full cyberspace operations from a running the network and actively defending the network perspective.
All right, thank you, sir. For our J2, the concept of collection management for defensive cyberspace operations only recently has gained traction within our community. How would you go about leveraging the collection management process to detect cyber threats to our networks?
Well, Chief, you're right. I mean, collection management is an entirely new field for defensive cyber. It's been around for a while for some of the other types of cyber operations going on. But really, when I looked at it, I mean, the principles are the same as they are in the other domains. You analyze what you know about the networks, determine what the threat would be likely to exploit, and determine our information gaps, and go after the information that we're lacking. So from our perspective, we need to identify the sensors on the DODN that can collect the information and the cyber mission forces that we can utilize as well to go after it. And I see kind of three things taking place in the tasking process, and that'll take place on a daily basis. Eventually, we'll kind of integrate it into the CTO. But number one is using the DISA sensors, all the sensors they have in the network. Second is using the cyber protection teams to go out and collect. And thirdly is when we lack the authorities to do things, and for example, DHS may have authorities we need, they would be asked to contribute to the collection process as well.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, this is for the whole panel, but we're going to start with the answer with Dr. Matlock on the end, especially in view of the Kakoris that you're conducting for the organizations out within DoD. If an organization has limited resources for ramping up defensive measures, what are some of the ways they could optimize their constrained resources?
Good question. So, and then the model for the compliance-based inspections, I would tell you that we would come up with a list of 1 to N of things that we felt like the mission owners and their service providers needed to fix. And they still own that list. They need to grab it like they own it. Under the Kakori construct, we still produce a 1 to N list of findings or recommendations on how to strengthen their defensive cyber operations. But we can prioritize that 1 to N list now based on their known stated mission, their known stated mission relevant terrain cyber, for their exact points of presence on the DODN. So we need to make sure that they're strengthening themselves, that they're able to conduct their mission, defend their mission space, but because of the trusted relationships on the DODN, we need them also protecting the DODN. So folks can now prioritize the utilization of their resources all types of resources in terms of conducting their mission and defending their mission space, as well as defending the rest of us that are operating on the Doden. Chief?
So I'm going to, yes, priorities, but first I'm going to go back to the mutual support concept. It requires a lot of conversations when you talk about those priorities. The commander likes to talk about it in terms of risk to mission, risk to force, and the force being the network, the Doden. It requires a conversation between, as a supporting command, who we're supporting and what we need to do to support their mission assurance, while at the same time secure operating and defending the Doden. So there's a lot of conversations that have to go on sometimes at the combatant commander level for those in order to build those priorities. And then for us specifically, Colonel Kraft mentioned it already with the cyber tasking cycle, but that cyberspace operations directive is where we clearly delineate those priorities, at least through the next 6 months.
Yep.
So I'll say prioritize. But you've got to figure out what is important to you, and that really comes for me. It comes down to what is your task critical assets. What's your relevant cyber terrain? We may not be able to defend every single square foot of this room, but we have task critical assets in here we need to defend, and we know where we should know where the ingress and egress points are of this room, and so that's where we would focus our efforts going forward. I'll say that's thing one. Thing two, I know I said this last year, is I know we can't people our way out of this. All right, so we have to rely on industry. We have to rely on technology. We have to look at artificial intelligence. We have to look at how much of this are we able to automate and have and think, and we're doing it now. We can do more of it going forward just because of the amount of volume of traffic, the ever-increasing volume of traffic, the ever-increasing number of attacks that are ongoing. Because we're in a constant state of conflict, having that, having artificial intelligence in place and having heuristic models in place and having a lot of things be automated, which we are doing to certain scales today, and scale that up more. We will be able to better defend with the limited resources we have by focusing on technology. If we're not going to people our way out of some of these things, in some cases we definitely want a person in the middle, but we may be able to tech our way out of this with the support of industry, of smart folks like you all in the room, in getting after how we can better defend our nation and better defend our Department of Defense with the systems that we have in place. And just by us flipping a router that routes traffic into a sensor, we were able to take something that already existed in our network today and also use it for our defense, okay, as an alert system. So that's an example of, it didn't cost us anything to do that, but to look at the technology from a different perspective was of great value. Those are the things that we can do from an innovation perspective that's out there, in addition to buying some additional new capability where we could get after it. Because if you don't have a lot of resources, having a lot of resources sometimes is of great value because that makes you have to think more and think smarter about how you do things. And in many cases, you've got to figure out what's really important to you, what are the things you really have to defend, and how can you get after it with the people that you have and the money that you have available. Thanks.
Well, Chief, I think where we've gotten the most value and the most optimization has been by putting reserve component personnel on active duty. That has been a huge payoff. And I love our contractors, but truth is we get 50% more people by going after the reserve component folks. And it has its own advantages over just active duty people because we get to choose every one of them from the resumes. It's a wonderful thing. And we get some high-end tech company people that come in with some mad skills. Additionally, they get some benefit from working with us because they get a series of courses. We put them through Security Plus, Network Plus, Certified Ethical Hacker, and they walk away with a lot of additional certifications. So it's kind of a win-win for both us and the reserve component, but fantastic people we're bringing in the last 3 months.
All right, thank you. You know, Colonel Kraft brought up a good point. We are in a resource-constrained environment, and it's certainly challenging us to think our way out of a lot of problems instead of buy our way out. So I'm going to circle back to the whole panel, whoever wants to answer this. Let's just imagine for like 10 seconds, and Admiral Norton, I'm just joking when I say this, but let's think we're unconstrained and we have resources that we think we need to really properly defend the network. What's a few, for examples, where industry could help us? I mean, I know we talked about automation and connecting big data lakes and things like that, but for anybody, how can industry help us one day when we get a few more dollars in our coffers?
I'll jump on that one. So I'll start with automation. So automating a lot of our processes, from running our networks, software-defined networks is an example. Just running our networks and being able to maintain our networks is of high value to us, and in this mythical resource unconstrained environment to which you speak. And then having the ability to have predictive intelligence models in place so we can see the storm before the storm hits us is of high value to us. So having that private-public relationship that's out there, because we do get a lot of information not only from our government IC community on what we need to defend against, but we also get a lot of commercial threat intelligence from our industry partners in there. Both those get loaded into our sensor grids for what we're looking for, but actually more in this case is actually better. More partnering to get more commercial threat intel is better. More and better commercial threat intelligence is better. From an AI perspective, having the ability to not have a person in the middle having to make all those decisions, if we set our models up properly, we will be able to actively defend minute by minute. And we are doing that now. We load a lot of things in our sensors, and our sensors are able to make decisions for us in a rapid fashion. About every 4 minutes, they're making a blocking decision for us. That is of high value to us. And if we see there's a problem, then a human can go in and fix that. But we could do that at more layers, at more levels going forward. I'm not used to having an unrestrained resources question, Chief.
None of us are.
But if I knew to bring my Christmas list, I would have done that. I'll stop there.
Anyone else?
I'd like to piggyback on that. So we've talked about some industrial-based things. I would think that partnerships that's made a success in the last 12 months for the Joint Force Headquarters Doden Inspection Program is the partnerships that we've had with not just within the DoD, but Joint Force Headquarters Doden in itself is not able to inspect the Doden in a timely manner. So the partnerships that we have with the cyber service component commanders, to include the Coast Guard, how we reach out with sharing data with DOT&E or Department of Homeland Security, those are partnerships and collaborations that are enablers and force multipliers for you. And one that's probably not often thought about would be the partnerships with institutions of higher education. I would tell you, as practitioners, we're doing a great job of crafting the next generation of inspections. With the Doden Inspection Program, it's like a microcosm of what the operations folks would like to see on a grander scale. But I would challenge our institutions of higher education to follow us in cybersecurity and lead the way in the area of theory and research to inform our discipline and to inform our field.
Thank you.
Sure, I'll take a crack at it. I think one of the ways we could use assistance is the ability to aggregate all that data we have at the Tier 2 and Tier 3 levels. Up to what we're putting together at the Tier 1 level. That would be enormous. We get a lot of, so there's a lot of data lakes out there. The Army has a data lake, the DISA has one, Cybercom has one, that kind of thing. But to be able to sort of connect all those little streams so we all pull out of the same lake and we all pull the same trending would be pretty powerful and really would be a great way to start it every day with our process of analyzing the trends that we're getting.
All right, thank you. You know, one of the things I've learned as a chief of staff is how to respect time, my time and everybody else's time. So I'm going to ask one final question for the panel, and I'll keep everybody back on track here. You know, one of the things we've been charged with is really operationalizing the cyberspace domain. And what that really means is that we still need the CIOs, the chief information officers, in the S6, G6, N6, A6, J6, the people that run the joint cyber centers. We certainly need their support. But what we're really focusing on is the commander. and the J3s, the Directors of Operations. Because if you're operationalizing this as a warfighting domain, it requires that commander's DNA over all the plans and operations to make sure that we're successfully securing, operating, and defending the DoDN. So for the panel, what and how do organizations, and this is both Department of Defense and non-DoD, to include our international partners, how do we share information about proactive and responsive defensive actions without feeling they are compromising their own networks and information any further or compromising proprietary information or processes? Colonel Kraft, please open up.
I feel like I'm being picked on, Chief. Okay, so one of the big things we're working on, and really through the J5, with great support from the J5, has been to build out these partnerships, and with the J2 from the IC perspective. So taking it in a two-pronged attack here, is being able to get the right partnerships in place so we can provide information sharing and get the right information in from the IC community. And what we provide today, again, this is new, just like the CTO is new, like OGS is new, for this new organization that became FOC in January. We're a new organization, OpCon to Cyber Command. But what we provide is a thing called combat information. This is information off of the sensor grid that says, hey, this is what's going on, this is who's under attack, this is what's happening, this is how this is occurring, and much of that we collect is actually on the unclassified network. We have been able to sit down with Department of Homeland Security as an example and say, hey, let's figure out how we can share that level of information, because if the Department of Defense is under attack in these ways, I bet that Homeland Security would like that information, and they are sharing like-kind information with us. So we're starting to bring together from a whole of government perspective, and not only from a defend the DoDN, but also from a defend the nation perspective. High value in getting information from the intelligence community, high value in getting it from our industry partners from a J5 perspective, and then being able to link those two together. The goal would be to be able to automate this. Right now, it's being sent over in chunks in reports, as opposed to being able to automatically share indicators of compromise out so that folks could auto-load those same indicators of compromise in their systems and like kind. So there are certainly, that is an area where we can provide, I think, where we can rapidly improve as something that we're working on now, that will be high value not only for the Department of Defense, but also for our nation as a whole.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'll actually answer both questions with the same answer. And Colonel Kraft mentioned kind of automating that information as it comes in, but then the ability to share that. And step one in Gladiator Shield is be able to see yourself, and a lot of that I know is still being done kind of at the Excel spreadsheet level, right? Being able to automate and share that broadly across the entire community, not just within the cyber domain, but all of them as situational awareness is important, because you're right about the commander's DNA, and it comes down to being able to define the operational risk up to Commander JFHQ DoDN and up to Cybercom.
So I would like to offer that Vice Admiral Norton, in here in a short span of time, has two new bosses. So, one boss is Cyber Command operating under like the Nichols-Goldwater Act. And then we have another boss at the DOD Chief Information Officer Klinger-Cohen Act. I think that the synergy when, for example, the DOD CIO invites federal agencies and mission partners to work and conduct missions on the DoDN, the way they extend the invitations to these federal agencies and set expectations in those memorandums of agreement and such, it helps us, because it allows us not only share the same battle space, but to share information. So the programmatics that we see out of the Chief Information Office, I think is key. I think it has to be worked in tandem and in collaboration to be able to meet the operational commander's expectation and the mission owners conducting mission on the DoDN. So I would say that the more we could do to recognize we have a common cybersecurity end state allows us to get there, even though we're working under different authorities.
All right, thank you, sir.
I think I just add that Paul had a great point about the whole of government approach, which probably requires a few authorities revisions. But I guess what I would add finally is that we've got to find a way to have more of an automated sharing relationship with the coalition partners. and kind of leverage what we got available in some of the very, very capable organizations that we have in these Five Eyes countries. Over.
All right, I know we have like the most intelligent IT people in the room, and I saw a thing saying if you had questions, text it or email it to this thing. Are there any questions from the crowd?
Sir, we do have several questions, and we have about 15 minutes to go through them, so we'll get through as many as we can. First one, would it be beneficial for a company to invest in what they see becoming your priority before there is any procurement, investing before there is the immediate possibility of ROI?
All right. Before I turn it over to the panel, I'll say two quick things. Yesterday was Meet the PM, so hopefully you talked with Mr. Frank McHenry and Miss Mary Ann Roth. The second thing I'm going to say is that the panel will stick around for a few minutes after this for autographs, photographs, or for any follow-on questions. With that, who would like to take that one?
I could take that. I mean, prior to this, I was doing capabilities development for another domain, but I always found that when companies put some skin in the game, some their own IRAD money, and they can actually show me that something works, that goes a long way toward getting toward a contract later on. Showing me that on PowerPoint with some drawings is one thing. When you actually show that something works, that's a whole other thing. And by the way, if you do the IRAD, then you own the rights to the product, right? So it's a good thing.
I'll say I don't want to burst any bubbles, but JFHQ Doden, we do not have procurement dollars. Okay, so we look to our organization, the organizations that resource us. From our administrative side, DISA resources us. So if industry comes to us and says, we have something we think you could really use to help automate this or figure out how to do cloud security better or whatever the case is, for situational awareness or command and control, awesome, please come and let's talk. But then just so you know, we will turn to the director of DISA for funds or the commander of Cyber Command for funds to see if that can be procured on our behalf.
You know, that's a good point. So U.S. Cyber Command was just elevated as a unified combatant command, so they have that capability. Secondly, back in 2015, we were born out of DISA, so we still maintain a relationship with DISA. They're our administrative headquarters. United States Cyber Command is our operational headquarters. Vice Admiral Norton has probably the most comfortable job in DoD because within 3 business days, she received a brand new operational boss from General Nakasone, who commands the United States Cyber Command. He's also director of NSA. And then a few days later, we had a new DoD CIO, Mr. Deasy. So she is reporting these dual channels, which is very challenging. And so, as Colonel Kraft said, we go to DISA quite often for assistance in identifying resources to bring an operational capability to the warfighters. Next question, please.
Given Colonel Kraft's comments regarding procurement authority, is there any special guidance for small business opportunities available under JFQ HQ Doden?
I will say this real quick before Colonel Kraft jumps in. We have a service contract through a contracting company on the GSMO contract vehicle, and we are looking in the future, both near-term and long-term, to diversify and looking for small business partners. Did that answer your question?
Thank you. Next question. Last year at this conference, officials said JFHQ Doden needed more intel support for DCO, even standing up Intel and Ops fusion cells. Has there been a change in intel support for DCO, and what else is needed?
I'll grab this one. Okay, sure. The answer is absolutely, and it was largely facilitated by the J3 and Admiral Crichton, and they stood up an organization called the J34. But then that's exactly the focus of that is Intel Ops Fusion, and it's every day. They do terrific work there, and they've kind of put together all the trending data that we pull for our CTO every day. So it's a huge step forward.
Yeah. And so the J34 Directorate is key to the J3 or to the command, because we will lay down what we see off every sensor, what's going on. That goes in the daily report, and then we do a deep dive on Thursdays in our larger commander update brief on what exactly is going on and where, down to who is being spearfished, who is being whaled, what tunnels opening up in what countries, what our concerns are, and we rely on not only DIS's infrastructure but other infrastructures and IC information, and that's what we really put it together. Because just taking data off of a sensor is really the what of what's going on, and so I very much rely on our J2 to give me the so what or the why, potentially even the who.
What does it mean?
To make that of more value. And so when we take it off a sensor, it's really combat information. It's not really fused intelligence until we get more information from the J2 on why this is going on, why did it happen on this day, why was it this much, do we see any behavioral patterns that, as we roll back and do some forensics before, and if so, then who do we need to inform going forward? So big capability, very, very important to our command, is bringing together the ops and the intel now at this level to really operationalize our domain.
And I'll add to that it was about last year at this time that we stood up the J34. So it's only a year, it's still maturing, and we're still looking for some qualified, intelligent people who understand this to partner with us and help us out.
And just so you know, so when we talk, I'll go back to a question, 4 questions ago. What else did you want? So we're working on bringing in some big data scientists, okay? So at the highest level that we can, because we've got a great group of folks that are doing big data analytics off of various Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3 sensors. We're coming up with great questions to ask those sensors, but I'm telling you that the more the merrier on better questions to ask in order to get that right information. So that's really what we use to help defend the DoD today, is the answers to those questions. Better questions will give us better results. Thank you.
And through the U.S. government, we're part of the Cyber Accepted Service. So if you swing by our booth, which is a subset of the big DISA booth right out there, we have some brochures about employment opportunities. So please come on by. We'd love to talk to you. Next question, please.
When it comes to traditional warfighting domains, there's no question the U.S. is dominant compared to military forces around the world. How would you characterize our current cyber forces and capabilities compared to our adversaries? And are they implementing the same policy and information assurance constraints?
I'll start this answer, then I'll hand it off to somebody way smarter than me down the road to the right. What makes the United States Armed Forces so powerful isn't just our individual soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. It's the ability to command and control them in timing and tempo and put them at the right place at the right time to deliver the maximum effect. We do that incredibly well because we integrate our planning and our operations across all the warfighting domains. And I'm very proud, I think most of the people in this room are very proud to have been part of that, either in a direct role or in a supporting role throughout your careers. And for that, I say thank you very much. But that's what makes us so powerful. Our adversaries are smart, they're committed, the threat is real, it's persistent, it's 24/7. As Admiral Norton said on her opening comments, we are decisively engaged with adversaries every day, every minute, every second. When you're sleeping on Christmas Eve, we're being attacked. When it's Easter Sunday, we're being attacked. When it's 4th of July, we're being attacked. And so we have a 24-hour operations center, our JDOC, with Joint Force Headquarters Doden Ops Center, which maintains that vigilance, partnering and coordinating with all 42 components and directors and AO commanders across the Department of Defense. So I just wanted to shape that answer before I kind of look down to my right and see who would like to just add on.
I'll add this job that I'm in. I think others would agree from their job perspective. This is the best job that I've ever had in my 25 years of service. This is the best job. This is taking everything that we've learned over the last 25 years of running and defending and securing networks, and now applying it in a now new domain that's always existed, in a new domain, and operationalizing that domain. Because of the great people that we have across the Department of Defense, because of the industry partners that we have, because of our amazing coalition partners that we have, and our U.S. Technological base, we are doing very well. Can we do better? Yes. It is also the most humbling job that I've ever had Because the more you understand about what's going on, the more that you understand about the threat, the more you understand about what we need to work on as a Department of Defense, as a nation. Those are the things that we know we need to get after and prioritize based on the resources that we have. That is key to our success. And the only way that we'll be able to achieve that, to gain and maintain our superiority in the space, is with great people, great technology, and great partnerships. Great partnerships like the folks out here in the room. So we're counting on you as much as hopefully you're counting on us to secure, operate, and defend the duties network in the nation.
Hoorah.
So, Chief, I wonder if I might give a general answer, response to that question, as I understood it. The cyber domain, it being a man-made domain, is a little different from the others, but what I found is we don't need to own everything from an American mindset. Sometimes we just need access to information. Sometimes you just need access. Sharing is helpful. And what I would submit to you, what I've seen from mission partners and coalition partners is their diversity of thought on how they approach the problem set is tremendous. Their intellectual contributions here in this area. So I would say that we need to not think about trying to be anything except collaborative in this space, and to move out smartly in partnerships and coalitions.
I think I just add that our adversaries don't have the same constraints we have by any means. Just look at the amount of intellectual property that's stolen every year, and the reason it's stolen is because we haven't made it painful enough for them. So we had to get to the point where we make it so costly to do that when they do the cost-benefit analysis, it's not worth doing it. But right now, as long as we can pay for their RDT&E to get things done, well, they're going to keep doing it.
Thank you, sir.
We have time for 2 more questions. The first one, now that Cybercom is elevated to COCOM status, how do you see the JFHQ DODN evolving?
I'll take that one real quick, then I'll turn it over to the panel. The first thing is battle rhythm. We had a meeting with their chief of staff about a week and a half ago, and since they're an elevated combatant command, they are filling all the white space we used to have with their boards, bureaus, center cells, and working group to help feed timely and accurate information into their commander's decision cycle. That's going to affect us because as our higher headquarters, we need to nest our battle rhythm into theirs. Additionally, as Colonel Kraft and others have mentioned, we also support the 9 combatant commanders, the 5 server cyber components, and the 28 field agencies and activities within the Department of Defense, and they all have a battle rhythm as well. And so the challenge is really going to manage our time to make sure that we're bringing timely and accurate information into Cyber Command's battle rhythm to support their full spectrum cyberspace operations, while at the same time we maintain SA and the ability to command and control DODN operations and defensive cyberspace operations, internal defensive measures on a global nature ourselves.
I'll start this one off. I talked earlier about building up the assessment process and resource-informed planning. As Cybercom elevates, or just has elevated to combatant command, and we step in at the operational level, have an opportunity to drive resourcing based on how well we're doing on those plans, driving their own integrated priority list. We talked about having limited resources and how we prioritize, and as an advocate for all of the DoD and cyberspace, Cybercom has an opportunity to do that, and we can help inform that through our assessments process.
Thank you.
So, Chief, the thing that I would submit to you as the strategic vision unveils and becomes more clear for us through the prism of U.S. Cyber Command, we'll not only get a chance to strengthen the security of the DODN, but defense of the nation and the whole of government. So I think it's that vision, that strategic thought, and that leadership that we'll be looking forward to as we focus on how to defend the nation and the whole of government, and through those partnerships and collaborations and the vision that's going to be put out by our senior leadership. We need that strategic thought.
Thank you, sir.
I think from an intelligence perspective, it's caused us to really have a better relationship with the Cybercom Intelligence Directorate in many ways. Better collection management coordination, better coordination with NSA, better intel support to planning. In particular, a huge demand signal now from Cybercom for our operational information, that data that comes out the sensors, that they're just saying we need that and we need it now. It's been a big breakthrough.
Thank you, and I believe we have time for one more question.
In your experience, how well are we defending the Doden, and where do you see significant challenges or room for improvement?
Colonel Kraft, sir.
All right. Okay. So, how are we defending the Doden? Very well. What could we do better? What my focus of effort is driving, again, the next SIOD in terms of the aiming point for what we need to do for Department of Defense is we have spent years and years focused on infrastructure, so routers, switches, servers, and making sure that's right. And we know how to do that. We've got policies, regulations on how to do that, and that's done very well. We need to shift because that's not the only thing that the information network is. It's also our platform IT. It's also all of our programs of record. It's also our ICS and SCADA systems. It's also the cloud. It's also all of our cross domains that we have out in the network. Okay, so we just got to make sure that we don't become so focused on doing one thing so well, which is the fabric of our network, that we do that at the cost of not taking care of the remainder of the network, which is also important, which are also doors that we need to look at to ensure that we are securing and actively defending, and also avenues of approach into our network that could impact our business operations, healthcare operations, our Department of Defense operations, our kinetic operations going forward. So our goal is that we take a grander approach. We open the aperture up and we don't just consider infrastructure in its totality as the one thing that we got to make sure we defend. It's actually, there's more things that we have to consider, and we are going through that process now within the DoD.
You know, I would add, let's be brilliant in the basics. A lot of problems on the Doden are user error. So when you think about this, it's a leadership issue. It's an all hands on deck issue, and it's a training issue. People need to take ownership, and they need to take responsibility for their actions. So one thing to start is at the individual level, but at the end of the day, it's a leadership challenge. And that's why we're working with the commanders and directors of the 42 AO commanders versus just the CIOs and the J6s. So it's a leadership challenge, and it's certainly something that that we're getting after, and we've implemented certain things, like, for example, the Doden's Principals Meeting, where Vice Admiral Norton is reaching out to the 3 stars across DoD to talk specific issues associated with both Operation Gladiator Shield and other defensive cyberspace operations. So it's her leadership that is reaching out and showing that this needs to be a top-down driven process. And I think through that and the other measures that our staff here discussed is certainly going to help at the end of the day keep the Department of Defense securing, operating, and defending the Doden to enable mission success for our warfighters.
Just like to close with, I'd like to thank AFCEA and its sponsors for putting on a great event. Thank you all very much.
Let's thank our panel.